In the making of a cattail doll, generally it takes about 6 cattails to make one doll on the average, depending on the size of the doll. But if you're making a doll that's related to the size of the leaf. So basically, if you wanted a broom handle, you need a stalk, and then you need as big a cattail as you can find in the swamp, and then maybe 3 average size cattail, or 2 average size and 2 smallest cattails. So in my hand I have isolated out the materials that I will use for this specific doll. Now here on the stalk, we don't have very many useful leaves, but the leaves that are here, the poorer quality leaves, can be used for the brains of the doll. And so I can strip off the leaves and at the same time end up with the shaft and broom handle. Generally you take the average size leaf, like this is supposed to be my average size cattail, and you take 2 of the bigger leaves from that average size, and when you roll them up, that should be the size of the doll's head. But I'll just use these poorer quality leaves. You don't have to use very good leaves for the brains of the doll because it's going to be hidden. And I roll up the leaves in a tight ball that resembles an egg more than a sphere or more than a marble or whatever. Keeping in mind that it's this ball that determines the height of the doll. A human's head is 1/7 the height of general. So by making this ball big enough to suit your needs, if you want a doll that's 7 inches tall or 7 centimeters tall, then the head better be a centimeter. Now I would deem that this one more short leaf would produce a doll that will be not too big for the leaves that you're using. If you make a doll that's too small for the leaves, it kind of doesn't look as good as it could, and if you make a doll, too big a doll out of leaves that are too small, it's not very good either. And I've been using poor leaves here. Now I go for the smallest cattail that I have in my collection, and I find about 6 leaves to cover the head. And the core leaf, I always say, this is a leaf that's very special. It's in the heart of the cattail, and it's usually convex on both sides, where normal leaves are concave on one side and convex on the other. I'll use that for the necktie or scarf. I have placed my first leaf right over the top of the doll's core of the head. Then the next leaf is crossed slightly on the very top of the head, but a little off of the others, so that as I keep adding the leaves, I'm getting a neat coverage of the head. And by so doing, I get the attachment of the doll's head to the body, like so. When that number of leaves were sufficient, I squeeze the head a little, give the neck a twist to sculpture or smoothen out the head. And then I use the core leaf, which is the most protected, most supple, and usually the strongest leaf, and I tie it by using a technique called whipping, where you put down a fold. I'm putting a fold here. I got this short end to pull on and this loop to thread through later, and with what remains here I wrap without releasing the pressure on the leaves around the head. I wrap it carefully, and when I have wrapped it 3 times, which is usually sufficient, I pass that wrapping end through the loop I had previously formed, and then I make it disappear like so by pulling, and add this to the body, and that's the first stage of our doll construction. Now I have the head here, and by taking my fingers I can measure down till I get to 1/7. I need this length here for my next process, the next part of making the doll. That is, that's going to be how tall my doll will be. These, if I trim them, I try to keep them in order for later use. Now I take my 2 average size leaves, 2 average size cattails, and take the longest leaves that are in it, and I need from 6 to 8 leaves for this type of doll. So I've got 4 in this hand, and I'm saving that core leaf for later. And then I find find 4 more leaves for the other, which I have right, one more, right there. And I take the 4 going one direction and the 4 going in the other direction. And here's the butt ends of the leaves here, and there are the butt ends there. And I want that distance between butt ends to be at least 4 times the height of the doll. So I just stretch that out. It doesn't matter if these things hang over the ends a little, but this distance from the butt end to the butt end there should be about 4 times the height of the doll, which is 1, 2, 3, 4, quite close there. You can get away with 3 times, but 4 is even better. I'm taking this bundle, and at 1/3 the distance, I start to twist my first arm. Now the distance from fingertip to fingertip of the outstretched arm is very close to your own height. And so to make the doll look right, the outstretched arm should be the same height as the doll. And this being one arm, it should be half the height of the doll. And so I take about 6 twists, and I take and measure, and I calculate that that is half the height there. That's one arm. And to keep that arm from unraveling, I take some of the leaf on this short edge and sort of tie it. And when you're experienced, you don't need to do that there. Now it won't unravel. Then I take this bundle that's remaining over here, excluding the leaves that were from the other part, and go up and take a little measure that's perhaps a quarter longer than the other arm to know where to start. And you start twisting it towards the other arm, like so. If you're doing a lot of dolls, you might not use your teeth. You might have a clamp that's attached to a table or something of that sort. There are the arms, and they should be close to the doll's height. Quite close. That would be okay for us, I guess. A little slightly short. So there we have the doll core and head, and here are the arms. And by dividing the core, we put the arms in, and we now have the semblance of a doll. All we need to do is add the dress to the doll. All of the leaves that will fold for the full length of the dress. This is a dress that goes all the way to the floor. We put on leaves, anything that we can find initially, saving the broadest and nicest leaves for the last. It is better to err in the direction of more leaves than less. Use up all of the 6. There probably would be a little left over. Just about. Boy, the wolves are really howling. The coyotes, I should say. And here we have the really broad leaves. 1 or 2 we could save for the headdress if they're particularly broad. Those, when they tore off, they didn't tear off very broad. So I'll take one off very carefully for the headdress. Now over here we have this end here that the leaves are kind of narrow. Put that over the shoulder. Trim those off so I get more material for my shoulders. Notice that if you hold on to the trimmings, you can use them to good effect. And when the bulk over the shoulders is beginning to reach the point where you're satisfied with it, then you use up a few of the other leaves that are around, and then put on your broadest leaves. Here I'm starting to pick up some of the broad leaves, put them on the outside. It gives your dress a less jumbled appearance. Here we have some very broad leaves. I can find 2. There, I've got 2 leaves here, 1 over each shoulder. And I can tie the doll at the waist. You here have an opportunity to make generally either an empire dress or a pinafore. Now I pick up that leaf that I've been saving, the core leaf that's convex on both sides, and I whip for the second time, this time around the waist. The first time was around the neck. So I lay down this short end for pulling, a loop for threading through, and take the other end. And here you may attempt to tie this very, very tightly to give some shape to the doll. And 2 or 3 times around, pass the end through the loop. Same method for tying a band-aid with a variety of wilderness materials. And we lock it there. Now here we might have this particular piece trimmed off short, it doesn't want to stay in place, or we may twist it with another leaf, borrowing a leaf from the dress, and make a kind of a sash cord. Easier to do that. Pulling it all ahead, you know, T. Now this is the doll in its simplest form. We now can add a headdress, which could be braids, it could be old man's beard. If it's a kitchen witch, it could be a conical hat made with a birch bark. I'll trim off that, and then I'll trim off the bottom of the dress. Err in the direction of making the dress longer than shorter. Seems to make the doll look neater. Generally we could support this on a flat surface to do this so you don't come anywhere near yourself with the knife. Anything that's out of place, snip it off. There's still some leaves left down there for a broom and for a headdress. Now the simplest headdress is to take a headscarf, and you could make braids. This is the shorter version of the doll. You pick the side of the doll that looks the neatest and put on. This doll at this stage could have also been made into a Christmas tree angel. And we take tie on the headdress. Dress is complete. Scissors are a handy item to trim off the doll, but here in the wilderness we often carry very few tools. The knife is still sufficient. Now the doll's arms could be stretched a little bit, and broom handle in, whip it. Spread the broom out a little bit. Flatten the broom. Take your knife. Well, we have the broom that's completed here. The hands here are twisted so that they have fists. That's the main purpose of making the arms into rope. And we stick this in there, give it an extra twist for tension. And over here, put it in, and adjust the doll broom to the doll's height. The broom helps the doll to stand, and cut off the excess broom handle. The doll is completed.